Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Today I am here with yet another new chapter of forensic medicine. This is called forensic psychiatry. Here we will apply our knowledge of psychiatry to help police and judiciary. Now, before going further, it's imperative that we have a basic knowledge of psychiatry. However, as per the current MBBS syllabus, psychiatry is included as a short subject within medicine in the final year. So, as this forensic medicine is supposed to be taught in the fourth and fifth semester, most of the students don't have any idea about what psychiatry is. So, in today's class, in this 1 hour, I will try to review a bird's eye view of psychiatry. Then in the next session, we will discuss how this knowledge of psychiatry is medico-legally important for any doctor, for any registered medical practitioner, not just practicing psychiatrist. Okay. So at the end of the session, I will expect that you guys should be able to understand the impact of the new Mental Health Act, and you guys should be able to comprehend the different psychiatry disorder and their presentations. Okay. Forensic psychiatry is a subject that deals with application of the knowledge of psychiatry in the administration of justice. What is till whatever chapter we have covered till now, the only part where you would find application of psychiatry is in the term of compos mentis or non-compos mentis. Compos mentis means soundness of mind. So for giving a consent to any investigation or to sexual intercourse or to a surgery, the person have to be compos mentis, or that is mentally sound. Unless he is compos mentis, he cannot give a valid consent. So other than that, there are varied applications of psychiatry in the field of forensic medicine. Now, as mental disorder is a specialist province, psychiatry is a specialty. How but every medical practitioner is expected to have a working knowledge of psychiatry while dealing with patients, and many of these cases will be involved with medico legal implications. Now, as I said in the first we will discuss about Mental Health Act. Mental Health Act, it came into force in the year of 1993. Actually, it was passed in the year 1987. Before that, there was one act which is called Indian Lunacy Act, which was passed by the British at 1912. This Mental Health Act 1987, it repealed the Lunacy Act, and it was enforced in the entire India since 93. It introduced some new terms. Earlier, we used to call mental asylum. That is where mentally ill persons or insane persons or lunatics were sent for treatment. Now, all of these terms has changed. Now the asylum is known as a psychiatric hospital or nursing home. There's no such term as lunatic. He is known as a mentally ill person or mentally challenged person. And a criminal lunatic or a criminally insane person, he is now known as a mentally ill prisoner. Now, a reception order is an order issued by a magistrate or a judge for admission or detention of a mentally ill person in a psychiatric hospital or nursing home. Okay. And this reception order can be issued at the request of a relative. That relative includes any person who is related to a mentally ill person by blood, marriage or adoption. Okay. So this is the starting of Mental Health Act, but after that there are portions of Mental Health Act which details how a reception order can be issued, how a mentally ill person is supposed to be admitted in a psychiatric hospital, what are the different ways of admission of a mentally ill person into a psychiatric hospital, and what are the different civil responsibilities of a mentally ill person. But before going into all that, we will now have a brief discussion about the psychiatry subject. So, psychiatry deals with the diseases of mind. So, our mind has multiple functions, in multiple facets. One facet is our consciousness. Consciousness means that is the function of the cognitive ability, that we are aware of our surroundings, we are aware of our reality, that this is the reality we live in, the time, place, person, etc. These realizations form our consciousness. Now, there can be some disorders of that consciousness. There can be disorder of our thought content, there can be disorder about our mood content. So, we will deal with that one by another. So, we will first start order of the disturbances of consciousness. First, what is confusion? Confusion is when the thinking process lacks clarity and coherence. So, the thinking process is unclear, that is incoherent. So, the thoughts do not gel with each other, and so the person is confused about his reality, his time, place and person. He is not sure whether he is in a hospital or he is in a home, or it's his home or it is in-laws home. So, this is what confusion is like. It is seen in both organic and functional disorder. Then there is clouding of consciousness. The consciousness is clouded, means it's impaired. This is a mild global impairment of the cognitive functions, that are the intellectual functions, in addition to decreased awareness of the environment. So, now here the clouding of consciousness means the person is decreased awareness of the environment. That means he is less aware of the reality he is in, he is less aware about the surroundings, and there is a mild intellectual disability. The next part is delirium. Delirium is a more severe disorder. Here clouding of consciousness is a mild impairment, a delirium is a little bit severe. Here there is impairment of consciousness, but there is an additional element, that is the perception and affect, or that is the mood. So, in delirium both three facets of mind can be affected simultaneously. One facet is his consciousness, another facet is the perception of his surroundings, and the third one is the mood. Any of these three or all of them together can be impaired, that is delirium. A delirious patient has perceptual impairment, that is he can have hallucinations. Hallucinations means he perceives sensations which are actually not there. He can hear something, but actually there is no sound. He is visualizing something, but the object is actually not there. So, these are hallucinations. He can be, so that's the perceptual impairment. He can be irritable, restless, that is the mood abnormality, and his thought content is irrelevant or inconsistent, that is his cognitive impairment. So, that is a delirious person. And common example of delirium is delirium tremens. Delirium tremens is when an alcoholic person, after having a binge drinking, suddenly lays off the alcohol, and when he is coming off the withdrawal, a part of the withdrawal symptom is delirium tremens. In delirium tremens, there will be hallucinations, he will be irritable, restless, can be violent even, and his thought content is irrelevant and inconsistent, he is not aware about his environment. So that is how a delirium tremens patient will present to you. Next part is the twilight state. Twilight state is, here twilight means it's the when the sun is setting, the light is decreasing. So here also the consciousness is clouded and is decreased, and it can be narrowed even. Narrowed means restricted awareness of a person towards the environment. That is, in the environment he is aware about only one aspect, but he is oblivious about all the other aspects. That is called narrowed awareness. So there's decreased consciousness about the surroundings, decreased consciousness about the reality, but the person is able to perform basic functions like walking, driving even, and but after that he has amnesia about that state. So that is twilight. This twilight state is known to occur with epilepsy, brain trauma, dissociative disorders, alcoholism, etc. Dissociative disorder means it is the what in the popular cine culture, in the movies, is depicted as the multiple personality disorder. The multiple personality disorder is actually known, the term is dissociative disorder. One example of twilight state is the mania apotu. Mania apotu is a condition when a person who drinks a very small amount of alcohol but develops a twilight state, and then he will move around but he is oblivious of his actions. He can commit crime, but after that he will be having amnesia about that event. Apart from twilight state, another more severe disorder of consciousness is oniroid state. Oniroid state means a dream-like state. This is seen in the schizophrenia. And here in the dream-like state, he has multiple scenic hallucinations. Means beautiful sceneries are played in front of him as a visual hallucination, and he lives in a dream-like state. So that is called, the atmosphere is strange, it's dreamlike, that there's a smooth, the sweet scent in the air, the person is in a beautiful garden, so certain unicorns are passing by. So this strange dreamlike state is called oniroid state. A difference between twilight and oniroid state is, in the oniroid state the person will be able to recollect the hallucinations. He will state what he is observing. But in twilight state, the person has amnesia. That's a difference between how a clinician difference between twilight state and a oniroid state. Then a fugue. Fugue is common. We have heard about fugue state. Fugue state is seen in senile dementia or in Alzheimer's. Our older grandparents, sometimes if he is suffering from Alzheimer's or senile dementia, can have fugue state. That is, he will forget about his family and home, and he would just leave the home and wander around in the streets. He cannot remember his name, cannot remember his address, and after some time someone would find him and bring him home. So this is fugue state. A person forgets part or whole of his life, leaves home and wanders away, and he is in a complete amnesia towards the period of wandering. This is seen in depression, schizophrenia, epilepsy, etc., but can also be seen in severe Alzheimer's disease also. Now, memory. Memory is our ability to store and recall information. That is, whatever we are observing around our world by the virtue of a sense organ, we are seeing things, we are hearing things, we are sensing things, we are tasting food, we are smelling smells, and we are experiencing new events, and all of these are stored, all of the information is stored in our brain as memory. it has three distinct components. One is the registration, that is a new event is registered, the new information is registered in our brain. Now that information has to be retained for a long period, and after that when required, the required information we should be able to recall back. That is the three distinct components of memory. Now memory is of two types, recent memory and remote memory. Now recent memory is the last few days memory, and remote is a long decade old memory. When we were in kids, how we went to school, our love, when we first time fell in love, our first kiss, our marriage, etc. These are the remote memory, the important stuff that you remember your entire life. Amnesia is loss of memory. You know that this loss of memory can be partial or complete. This amnesia can be of these types. Functional amnesia means there is no definite cause in the brain that would explain the amnesia. And organic amnesia means there is a definite cause that would explain the amnesia. This can be anterograde or retrograde. Retrograde amnesia is seen in, we have talked about in head injury. Retrograde amnesia is seen in concussion, and anterograde amnesia is seen in certain drugs like rohypnol or flunitrazepam. In these drugs, the death rape drugs, these are the drugs which are used to spike alcoholic beverages in certain parties, and when the drink consumes that alcohol, after that she is sexually assaulted or raped, but due to the action of the drug, she in the next morning she is not able to recollect the faces of the person who has raped her. Now you can say that as she is not remembering her last night, then that should be a retrograde amnesia. But no, she forgets, she lost that memory from the point of consuming the drug into the future. So it's anterograde amnesia. Now what are the disturbances of thinking or thought process? Thinking means the ideational components of mental activity, that is the our power of or the ability of imagine things, appraise a situation, or evaluate a problem, the forecast of an outcome, how to plan for the outcome, and to create a plan. So this is the thinking, how we perceive a problem, how we proceed about it, how we plan for it. All of this is the process of thinking. Now this thinking incorporates a lots of phenomena like perception. You have that any smell or a taste or a visual stimulus or a sound can evoke a particular memory that will help into a judgment of the situation. So all of these are involved in the process of thinking. Is of three types. One is fantasy thinking. In fantasy thinking, we imagine about absurd things, how it should have been like, what if I would be the president of India, etc. These are the fantasy thinking. Imaginative thinking is planning for the future, but that is achievable. That is how to crack an exam or how to be successful in life, how to be rich. This is the imaginative thinking. And rational thinking is how you plan to achieve that imaginative thinking. That is a rational thinking. Okay, so these are the three strata of our thought process. Now, if a thinking process is disturbed, what are the different signs and symptoms? One is a accelerated thinking. Okay, in accelerated thinking, the thought process becomes very fast. That is called fast thinking. So there's rapid, excessive, and loud speech. This is seen in mania. In a manic phase, when a person is excessively hyperactive, he will think fast, so he will talk fast. So that is a characteristic of mania. So conversely, there will be slow thinking. Slow thinking is seen in depression. Slow thinking means the lack of initiation, planning, or imagination. Then there's thought blockage. Thought blockage is seen in schizophrenia. That is, a person is speaking, then suddenly at the mid of a sentence he just stops because the thought is blocked. He doesn't know what to say next. That is thought blockage. Thought withdrawal is a person feels that he has no thought because an alien force has intentionally withdrawn thoughts from his consciousness. So this is a type of delusion. And circumstantiality is the speech proceeds slowly with irrelevant and unnecessary trivial details. That is the circumstantiality of a speech. This is an abnormal of the thought process. He remembers so much of trivial and junk that all of the main idea is there, the main speech is there, but it is burdened with unnecessary trivial details. Then what is the abnormality of the content of thinking? Content of thinking means the abnormal beliefs and convictions from the core of thought content. So delusional disorder means, delusion is known as paranoia. Paranoia is the term is coined from a Greek word of paranos, means distracted. So the person believes in something that is false, but he holds that beliefs with conviction, and even if the contrary is shown to him, that whatever he is believing is false, that is not true, he does not sway from his belief. That is called delusion. So delusion is a product of pathological process in the brain, characterized by it is held with an absolute conviction. The individual experiences the delusional belief as self-evident. The person will say, how can it be false? It's evident, it's natural, and it's of great personal significance. It's associated with his existence, and this cannot be changed by appeal or showing evidences of proof to the contrary. The content is usually unlikely and a product of fantasy, and this false belief is not shared by others from a similar socio-economic group. Because what is the importance of the last sentence? Belief in God. No one knows that God is there or not. There is actual proof, but many persons they are very pious. They hold to the belief of God very firmly. So even if we scientists show them the proof that God doesn't exist, they will not sway. But this is not a delusion, because this false belief is shared by others of a group. So delusion is a false belief which is held with absolute conviction, and it cannot be changed by an appeal or by contrary evidences, and it is not shared by others from a similar socioeconomic group. That is how delusion should be defined. It's a false and firm belief held with absolute conviction, which cannot be changed by an appeal to reason or evidences to contrary, and it is not shared by others from a similar socio-economic group. That is how delusion must be defined. Now, delusion can be categorized into these 6 types: erotomanic delusion, grandiose delusion, delusion of jealousy, persecutory, somatic, and mixed. This is the recognition. These types are recognized by DSM-4. DSM-4 is diagnostic manual for psychiatric disorder. It has a list of all psychiatric disorders. And ICD-10 is the International Code of Diseases. it recognizes two more subtypes, litigious and self-referential. So first we will start with persecution. Here pursuit means pursued. Any of you, if you have seen the movie A Beautiful Mind by Russell Crowe, there the Russell Crowe, the main protagonist, has delusion of persecution. Here the person believes that he has some very important knowledge or information, and the state or the government or some very powerful people are out to get him so that they can extract that information out of him. He is being pursued by a greater force. That is the delusion of persecution. Okay, so this is associated with suspiciousness, extreme anxiety and irritability. These are the accompanying features, and the belief is extremely stable. That is, in no way you can convince the person that that is not the fact, and they will increase in elaboration. That is, the more the time grows, the delusion grows stronger and stronger, and more details and elaborate streams are added to it. Individual believes himself to be the center of focus of the universe and a malignant attention. Some individuals may complain for profound and persistent sense of having been wronged, and then so they will seek legal help, and they will file hundreds of litigations or cases against the government. That is the litigious subtype. And so persecutory, so the delusion of persecution can evolve into a litigious delusion. Hypochondriacal subtype. Hypochondriasis is a person, hypochondriasis is a condition when the person strongly believes that there is a serious illness in himself, in her body, but the doctors are unable to diagnose and treat him or her. So he will change the doctors in a regular interval. He will visit hundreds of doctors, will undergo thousands of tests, but even if all of those tests are normal, he will firmly believe that there is some unexplained disease or some new disease that no one is able to diagnose. That is hypochondriacal subtype. Okay. So there can be involving the skin, that's a rash or a itch or a growth. Dysmorphic delusion, that is my skin features that I am growing uglier day by day. The delusion of body odor or halitosis, miscellaneous delusions, delusion of transmitting non-sexual diseases, that is infections. In nowadays, this can be a delusion of transmitting COVID-19. So a person can believe that he is infected by COVID-19 and he can spread it to others. So he can be recluse himself into his house, he can self-isolate, he can quarantine himself for an indefinite period. Eventually, that will be a big problem. So that is hypochondriacal subtype. That is why hypochondriacal subtype is very important for us doctors to be aware about. Then is the jealousy subtype. In a jealousy subtype, this is a delusional disorder when a person is fixed belief that he is being wronged by his partner. That is called jealousy subtype. It is also known as Othello syndrome. This is from the Shakespeare's tale of Othello and Desdemona. Othello was suspicious of his wife Desdemona, and one day while Desdemona was sleeping, he went in and killed her in a fit of jealousy and anger. So here in Othello syndrome also, the person who is having a jealousy subtype of delusion, he can be so convinced that his wife is being unfaithful. This is usually seen, but this can be seen in both sexes, that his or her partner is being unfaithful. They can proceed to murder even. So if a doctor comes around such type of patient, it's his duty to inform the partner that he or she is in danger. Now, there's another important is that this leveling of the false allegation by one spouse on the other is tantamount to a mental torture and cruelty. So, hence it can be ground for divorce. So, a person who is suffering from the delusion of jealousy or Othello syndrome, his partner can seek divorce from the court of law by ground of mental torture and cruelty. Erotomanic subtype. In the erotomanic delusion, the person has strong erotic feelings towards another person and that person has no knowledge about him. There is a persistent unfounded belief that the other person is deeply in love with him, but he or she is completely unaware of the solution. Okay, this can be seen in many films, and this is usually associated with the film stars or celebrities. When a fan feels that the film star or celebrity is in love with her. This erotomanic delusion, there's a Netflix series now going on. I've been watching that. That is You. The name is You, and here the person has an erotomanic delusion. So he stalks the girl, falls in love with her. Then he believes that it's his duty to protect the girl from the other boys, and he murders any other boy who likes that girl. So that is a variety of erotomanic delusion. Erotomanic delusion can proceed into harassment, sometimes assault, or even murder can be committed under aggression, as I just said. So the deluded woman or a person, and this is for the doctor or teacher important, because a female patient can have the delusion of erotomanic type, can be in love with the doctor and can allege that the doctor has shown strong erotic feeling towards her, and eventually no one will believe that the patient is wrong, and the doctor can be in a very bad situation. The same thing can happen between a teacher and the student. The student can have an erotomanic delusion about the teacher, can become involved with that, and eventually the student will be very much, if that feeling is not reciprocated by the teacher, the student will be in a fit of aggression that can proceed into a self-harm or an attempt to suicide. So this is a very important type of delusion which is very much meritorially important. Delusion of grandiose. Here the person believes that he is a very rich and wealthy man, and he is very all powerful man. He is very much healthy. So this is a rare find, because a person who believes he is all powerful and healthy, he will not go to a psychiatrist for any help. So there is less record. So having a delusion of grandiosity is a poor prognostic factor, because the person when he is visited in a hospital is eventually a very far gone along the process. So why delusions are important? The majority importance of delusions are when a person does some act as a direct effect of a delusion he suffers from, and he strongly believes that the action he is doing, even if it's an assault or murder, that is for his self preservation. To protect himself from harm, he has to kill the other person, then he will not be held responsible for the act. However, if the delusion is of not that strong nature and the person believes that he is being cheated by him, he has been cheated by the other, but not, and he plans and he makes an elaborate plan to commit the murder, not to protect himself not for self-preservation but for revenge seeking, then he will be culpable of the crime. However, the doctrine of diminished responsibility may be called into play. That is, his punishment will be lesser than a normal individual. So, a person under delusion of persecution, if he feels that he is pursued by a police officer and he attacks that police officer, then he is not responsible, because he is doing that on the strong belief that this action is necessary for his self preservation. But a person who is suffering from Othello syndrome is plans to murder his wife by poisoning. He will be culpable for the crime, but a doctrine of diminished responsibility can be there. Okay, clear? Now we will discuss about the disturbances of perception. Perception means how we will perceive the environment around us, how we see things, how we hear sounds, how we smell the fragrances, how we taste the food, etc. So, this alteration in the spatial form of objects can be micropsia, that is, objects will appear smaller, or a macropsia, or the objects can appear larger. In the same, and there can be distortion also. In hallucination, there is no external stimulus, but there will be a sensory experience. And illusion, there will be a real object, but he will mistake it for something else. That is illusion. These are perceptions, okay, the false perceptions in the absence of an external stimulus. They can affect any sensory system and they can occur in several systems concurrently. Around 10 to 25% population have experienced hallucination sometimes or the other. There are some common variation like hypnagogic or hypnopompic hallucination. Hypnagogic hallucination means these are the visual hallucinations immediately before falling asleep, and hypnopompic hallucinations are during transition from sleep to wakefulness. So, when we are just falling asleep, we can see some figures, that is hypnagogic hallucination, or when we just waking up, our visions may be blurry, or we can see in some objects or shapes moving around. That can be our hypnopompic hallucination. These are physiological nature. In acute bereavement, that is, a person has died, but his wife can complain that she can hear her husband walking in the house and talking back to her. That is a type of auditory hallucination, which is a part of the grieving process. After amputation, phantom limb syndrome can be there. That is, a person undergoes an amputation of a leg, but on the amputated part, the part which has been removed, he can feel an itch. That is a phantom limb hallucinations. These are common. These are seen in common normal persons without any psychiatric illness. Presence of these hallucinations, mainly the auditory hallucination, is an indicative of an psychosis. So, visual hallucination is there is no external stimulus, but the person is seeing something. Auditory hallucination is person is hearing something, but no one is actually speaking. The auditory hallucinations is common in schizophrenia. Here, the person will continue talking with an imaginative voice, that someone will talk back to him, but there is actually no one there. Olfactory hallucination is a sense of smell will be there, but there is no actual object. Gustatory hallucination, a taste will be there, but there is no food. Tactile hallucination, there will be a sensation in the skin without any actual stimulus. An example can be in acute alcoholism or in acute cocaine intoxication. The person can feel that there are small birds which are crawling around in his tin. The multiple small birds are crawling all over his body. That is called formitation. It's a type of tactile hallucination. Okay. Illusions. Illusions are misinterpretations of real sensory stimuli. That is, in the darkness, there's a piece of rope, but the person can mistake it as a snake. This is common variation. A child seeing monsters coming from the shadows, or hearing ghosts in the sounds of the wind. These are the different type of illusions. Illusions can be three types. Completion illusion. That is, there's the word is not complete, that the pattern is there, a photograph, it's not complete, but it's a human tendency to complete it with a familiar picture. Okay, so for example, a very known word, a very common word to you, it's a big word. If it is written with a single letter missing in the middle, or a single letter in the middle is changed, but while reading, you will read the original word. You will see the missing letter in that word. That is, it's your brain's tendency to complete the word to a previous experience. That is completion illusion. Affect illusion. That is, it is understood in context with the prevailing mood state. If you are very much afraid of the dark, then when you are in the dark, you are more likely to see ghosts and monsters. Pareidolia illusions. That is, seeing human faces in the clouds, seeing a god in the clouds. That is, shape is mistaken as a face or an image. That is pareidolia illusions. Now we will discuss about the disturbances of emotion. Experience of an emotion is known as affect. Now, if that affect persists for a longer period of time, it is known as a mood. So, if there is some event or some scenery in front of your eyes which gives you pleasure, then that pleasure is an emotion or an affect. And if you are happy for a longer period of time, that's a mood. So, this is a difference between affect and the mood. Now, the disorders are anxiety, depression, etc. Apart from quality of the mood, what makes a particular affect abnormal is the intensity and duration. So, depression is a common. We all have depression in some point of time, that in an exam we have done poorly than we expected, or our first breakup. So, in all of the scenarios, we will be sad, but the intensity of that sadness, the intensity of the depression, that differentiates whether it's a psychiatric disorder or not. As we know, the recent unfortunate suicide of that Sushant Singh Rajput, he was so depressed that he was reportedly undergoing therapy. He was reportedly having auditory hallucinations, and eventually he committed suicide because he was so depressed or sad regarding his financial situation or his career or whatever. So, we all go through our downfalls. In this lockdown due to COVID-19, many people has lost their jobs, but are all of them committing suicide? No. They are those people who has lost jobs, they are all sad. They were all depressed to some degree, but the intensity of that depression, if it is so huge that it compels the person to suicidal ideation, then it becomes a psychiatric disease. So, anxiety it's a state of subjective restlessness and apprehension. That is, a person is restless and apprehensive about the future, and it may or may not be accompanied by autonomic hyperactivity like palpitation, sweating, tremors, dilated pupil, etc. These autonomic symptoms can be associated with anxiety, but they may not be there. So it can be a situational anxiety, that is anxiety associated with exam, that you become very much anxious before going into a viva, that is a situational anxiety. Physiological anxiety is anxiety regarding a particular event of your life. Okay, so for example, having sexual intercourse, that can cause physiological anxiety in some persons, and eventually that can lead to a erectile dysfunction. As during a discussion of the importance, I have told you guys that the commonest cause of erectile dysfunction is psychological, performance anxiety, that is this. So then will come the neurotic anxiety. Neurotic anxiety is a psychological disorder. In neurotic anxiety, the person is overly anxious over a trivial matter which to a normal person does not warrant that kind of anxiety. Now, phobia. Phobia is common. We all know about phobia. There has been a movie about phobia. Phobia is an unreasonable and unwarranted fear of an object or a situation, and it is characterized by that the fear is out of proportion with the situation, it cannot be explained or reasoned away, and it is not under the voluntary control of the subject. If I am afraid of a dark, I can force myself into going into the dark and switch on the light, because that fear is under my voluntary control. I can choose to be afraid or not. My fear of darkness, it can be explained or reasoned away, but a person who has a phobia, he will not be explained that there is nothing to be afraid of. You cannot explain it to her, and you cannot force him into going into a dark room, no matter what happens. So phobia can be simple when it's about an object, like fear of spiders, it is known as arachnophobia. Fear of heights, it is known as acrophobia. So there can be fear of snakes, dirt, blood, water, etc. And complex phobias are fear of or phobia regarding a broad situation, like agoraphobia. Agoraphobia is the fear of open spaces, or a social phobia, phobia about a social interaction. These are complex phobias. Now, obsession. Obsession is an idea or an image or an affect or impulse that appears as a mental content with a subjective sense of compulsion overriding an internal resistance. That is, an idea appears into a person's head. Now he knows that this is unreasonable. He wants to resist it, but his internal resistance is overridden by a sense of compulsion that he has to do it. That is called obsession. So, obsession is an idea, image, affect or impulse that appears as a mental content with a subjective sense of compulsion overriding an internal resistance. It can be obsessional thinking, that a person who is praying, often during praying to a god or during worshipping a god, he recollects nude porn figures, He cannot resist it, he cannot wish it away. That's obsessional thinking. At the night, a person has an obsession about going out and checking the lot again and again. That is obsessional impulsion or obsessional act. A person under obsession can do any type of act. So that is obsession. Now, what is impulse? Impulse is a sudden irresistible desire compelling a person to the conscious performance of an action without any motive or forethought. There is a sudden and irresistible desire comes into the person, and he has to do it, and he does it without any motive or forethought. So some impulse control disorders are kleptomania. The person has an irresistible desire to steal trivial articles. Pyromania, irresistible impulse to set fire into things. This is pyromania is seen in serial arsonist, person who sets houses into fire. Mutilomania, irresistible impulse to maim the animals, to kill the animals or to break their legs. Dipsomania, irresistible impulse to drink. This can be water or alcohol, anything. So that is dipsomania. So these are the examples of impulse control disorders. So impulse is defined as a sudden irresistible desire compelling a person for conscious performance of an action without any motive. A person has an irresistible desire to set fire into the house. He will set the fire, but there's no motive around. He doesn't want to kill anyone, but he just want to set the fire. Okay. Now the last part, what is cytosis and what is neurosis. In the American Psychiatric Association, they define the term cytosis as a grossly impaired in reality testing. The person has no touch with the reality. He lives in his own fantasy world. So, in the gross impairment of the reality testing, the person indirectly evaluates the accuracy of their perception or thought. So, whatever thoughts he is having, there's no reality check. So, if he believes that murdering someone to achieve something, he needs to murder someone in his own world, that is justified because he has no sense of reality. So, there's no sense of justice or morality in his world. So, he makes incorrect inferences about the external reality. Okay. So, direct evidence of psychotic behavior is presents by the delusions or hallucination. So, if a person has a hallucination or delusion, that's evidence that he is losing touch from the reality. That is, he is going into psychosis. Their examples is agitated, inattentive and disoriented behavior seen in alcohol intoxication delirium. The same delirium remains, as I said earlier. The person has during that phase, the person has no touch with the reality. What is neurosis? Neurosis is a chronic disorder, but is non-psychotic in nature, and it is characterized mainly by anxiety. Here, reality testing is grossly intact. The person is in touch with the reality, but the behavior also does not actively violate the prevalent social norms. He does not do anything improper, but the disturbance is recurrent without treatment and there is no demonstrable etiology. So, that is neurosis. The main difference between neurosis and psychosis is, in psychosis the person has lost touch from the reality. In neurosis, the person has the touch with the reality. So, in neurosis, the behavior does not actively violate social norms. In psychosis, the behavior can actively violate social norms, and in psychosis there is a an organic etiology. There is, but in neurosis there is no demonstrable etiology. These are the main differences between psychosis and neurosis. So, thank you for bearing with me. It's been a long lecture, a long session. I hope I've been able to explain it to you what are delusion, delirium, illusion, hallucination, psychosis, neurosis, obsession and impulse and phobia. So, these are the common terms which are often asked in the exam. What are you need to learn the definition, example and medico-legal importance of these terms. So, please go through the textbook, and if you have any queries, feel free to reach to me. You can write your queries in the comment section, and if you like the video, please let me know and give me feedback and subscribe my channel. Thank you very much.